Welcome to the 157th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with Isla Morley, author of the new novel, Above. Stay tuned for the interview. The Reading and Writing Podcast is sponsored by the book-loving nerds at Riffle. Riffle is an online book community that connects readers with authors and books that they'll love. Readers use Riffle to find the next book that they want to read, and authors use Riffle to make their books stand out and drive sales. Join the Riffle community today at rifflebooks.com. That's rifflebooks.com, and look for the link in the show notes as well. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Isla Morley, author of the new novel, Above. Publishers Weekly said Morley scores with an audacious page-turner. Isla, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Jeff. Thanks.
Great. Well, can I have you read the first couple of pages of Above?
Sure. Dobbs wins the fight easily. He shuts and locks the door. I feel a small sense of relief. With a hulking slab of metal separating us, I'm finally able to breathe just a little. It is only when I hear another thump, another door closing someplace above me, that I understand. Not only am I to be left alone, I am to be hidden. I am a secret no one is able to tell. Just like that, instead of wishing Dobbs gone, I am now waiting for him to come back. Surely it won't take long. When Dobbs returns, I'll take him off guard. I'll push past him, dash outside, and sprint across the field. I will steer clear of the road. I'll head for the line of sycamore trees along the creek. I'll make my way east, and he won't think to follow me there on account of its being trappers' territory. Even if I do get snared, it'll be better than this, because someone will find me. Nobody's going to find me here. Whatever here is. A dungeon? I can't make any sense of it. A big round room with a massive pillar right through the middle of it. Contraptions, wires, pipes, spigots, dials. I keep my back turned to the space. Keep my face pressed up against the door. It is made of steel and has a handle, although not like one I've ever seen, something a bank might have on its vault. What has he done? What's happened to me? Surely Dobbs should be getting back by now. He'll take me out of here. He'll explain it to me, not like before, which didn't make any sense. He won't be rough either, or cross. He'll be nice, like how he is in the library. I look at Grandpa's watch. Only 15 minutes have passed. Even though it is still ticking, I wind it tight. If only I was still at the horse thieves' picnic, our town's annual tradition that I look forward to all year. The gathering that attracts a couple of thousand people has since moved from its original location among the walnut trees of Durr's Grove, now to Main Street, and its contests no longer include large mustache for boys under 17, or baby with the worst case of colic, but there's still a parade and a carnival. Apart from the parade, the next most popular event is the concert at the bandstand, where Daddy no doubt is now line dancing. It takes no effort to imagine what my sisters and brothers are doing. Susie will be strutting around the midway looking for boys, and Gerard, not actually bleeding to death from wrecking his pickup on I-70 like Dobbs had first said, will be off with his pals to scale the water tower. Having left the horse thieves' picnic early on account of Theo's fever, Mama's likely fallen asleep on her bed, the fan moving what the lazy July evening can't be bothered to blow through the window. No one has probably even noticed that I'm gone. How long will it take them before they do? And when they do, where will they imagine I am? What will they think the cause for my absence is? They won't be imagining anything bad, that's for sure. Bad things don't happen in Eudora, Kansas.
Great. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about Above yet, how would you describe your novel?
It's a psychological thriller, Jeff. It follows the story of a 16-year-old girl, Blythe, who's been living in Eudora, Kansas her whole life. And one night she's abducted by one of those survivalist types who believes the end of the world is near. And he keeps her in an abandoned Atlas F missile silo, which he calls the Ark, because he's got it stocked with all historical documents and an extensive seed catalog. He has DNA of almost every living creature known to man, but now with Blythe, he has a sound womb, and his plan is to keep her there until after the end of the world has happened, and then re-emerge unharmed, and as he says, seed the new world. So it really follows her struggle to survive, and at first to escape, and then later coming to grips with her captor's encroaching madness. But finally, the ultimate test is when she has to raise a child in captivity, in those kind of confines, a child who might never experience the world above. And so it's an examination of how she fosters a childhood for him and gives him a sense of hope, and keeps him from knowing the awful truth of their circumstances down below.
Wow. So do you remember the initial spark or idea that led you to writing Above?
I do. I was busy working on my second novel at the time, which lives in my drawer, and there was this headline about a girl in Belgium who had been abducted by her father and kept in a basement below the house, which he had prepared for years for his plan to abduct her. She was one of, I don't know, several children, and she ended up staying there under the house without ever having seen daylight for 24 years. And she ended up having 6 children, 3 of which he took up to live in the upstairs house, and made it look like, she had just dropped off those kids in the middle of the night, and then disappeared back with the cult or something.
Right.
But 3 of those children ended up staying with her that entire time, having never experienced the outside world, never having felt daylight or seen the moon or heard conversations involving other people. They were just very isolated. And I'm a mother of a young girl, and what struck me about that story was not the abduction so much as what would a mother do when she has to raise a child like that in those kinds of circumstances? How would she go about creating a world of wonder within those confines that those children can have, quote unquote, as normal of a childhood as possible? And that was really the spark. I had a very clear idea that the protagonist for my story would create an elaborate myth rather than tell her son the truth of their circumstances. There would be a fable, because, throughout history, fables mean so much to us individually and as communities. They point to a greater truth. They're comforting, and they're inspiring, and they give us hope. So I knew that she would fabricate some kind of story. And then I also had to figure out what of the world would she tell him that he wouldn't want to yearn for it as much. So in effect, she becomes an editor. She cuts and minimizes and abbreviates the reality of the world above, so that her son doesn't want to keep pressing to go above.
That's interesting. So do you think you'll ever go back to the book that you were working on when you got this idea?
After I finished above, I got it out of the drawer, and I went over it, and there's just too much that's wrong with it. And I think the problem with that project was the fact that I started off with a clever idea for the structure. And so I kept on pushing all the characters and the action and everything into this confining structure, because I just wanted it to work so badly. And with my first novel, Come Sunday, and with Above, in both those cases, I followed a character with an initial scene, and I wrote blind. So it was an incredible risk because I didn't know where it was going. I didn't plot. I didn't have any structure until way after much of the first draft was written. And that's the process that seems to work for me, rather than having the structure and then trying to fit everything into that.
Sure. Well, you just mentioned your first novel, Come Sunday. Have you always written fiction and wanted to be a writer?
I never wanted to write fiction. I grew up in South Africa in the 1970s and the 1980s, and in a very middle class, average family, and we were taught to have realistic ambitions for our lives. And also for me, in that time, writers were either from other countries, or they were from eons past, or if they were South African, they were either exiled, at risk of imprisonment, or about to be shot. Because this was the time of censorship, when the South African government really had, the arts by the throat, because music and words were a real threat to the status quo. So it would never have occurred to me to be so bold as to have an ambition to be a writer. I did work in magazines. I was an editor of a magazine, and I wouldn't really call that writing. It was just putting words together in a way that would sell magazines. And I just felt like, doing that kind of work was chipping away at my soul. And so after I moved to the US, I just swore off writing altogether. The only thing I ever wrote were airmail letters. That was before emails. Airmail letters back home to my mom. And then one night, we were living in Honolulu, and we were in a very difficult position in our lives. And I had the inspiration for what became Come Sunday. And just this character kind of emerged next to my bed on a really stormy night, and I described the scene to my husband, and he said, "Jot it down." Those three magical words, he just had such confidence and such a vision for me that I didn't even have for myself at that stage. So I thought I'd just write that little opening scene in my notebook in case it ever meant anything. But when I sat down to write it, it just kept on going. And I'd literally write blind. I'd close my eyes and I'd try and capture what I was seeing. And I just kept being led deeper and deeper into the story. And, I looked up about 80 pages later, some 3 or 4 months later, and I realized that I was writing a novel. And then I thought, oh dear, now what have I gotten myself into?
And then what was the process of finishing that novel and getting it published?
Well, I wrote part-time because I was working for the YWCA of Honolulu at that stage. So I wrote a couple of hours in the evenings, not every evening, and I wrote during my daughter's nap time. And we moved back to the LA area soon after I had revised that novel about 3 times. And it needed one good, strong, solid going through. And rather than go and find a job, I just decided that I would complete it. So I worked for another 8 months full-time, just polishing that novel. And then I researched about how to get a novel published. And that was the worst thing to do, because if you ever want a lesson in humility, all you have to do is go on the internet and look at your chances of getting published. But I spent a whole summer crafting a 1-page query letter for an agent, and I did a dream list of agents. The top 10 got my first mailing, and 2 days after I sent an email out, I heard from Emma Sweeney in New York, and she's the at that stage, Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen was just, topping the charts. And Emma is her agent. And I got an email back from Emma saying that she was interested in reading the manuscript. So I sent it to her, and a couple of days later, she called me and she said, I want to be your agent. I know exactly how to represent the story. And so she told me she was going to send it out to publishers, and I thought, okay, great. So maybe I'll hear from her in about 3 months. And a week later, she presented me with 6 or 7 offers from major publishing houses. So, it was just such a whirlwind. And we ended up going with Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And 18 months later, after selling the manuscript to them, Come Sunday hit the shelves, which happened right after we all fell off a cliff with the economic collapse of 2008. Right. So it was not the best timing to be bringing out a novel.
But that's an amazing story of getting it published.
It is, my husband had been coaching me, saying that now rejection's a part of the process, and we're just going to keep sending out letters and don't get discouraged, because he knows how thin-skinned I am. I write, Come Sunday was literally written in a closet. I moved aside his shirts and pulpit robes, and I moved my desk into a closet, and I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. And that is because, I think, I write out of some sense of insecurity. So, and I also didn't know if I was going to have anything at the end of all this time. So it was easier not to tell anybody, because then I would only have to deal with my own disappointment. So somehow having, that endorsement come so quickly to me was a sign that that I had found my bliss, and that I was to continue following my bliss, keep following my heart.
Right. So are you working on something now?
I am working on something. Again, it started with something that popped across my screen, and a character and a vision, and and so I've been trying to just be true to that process that has worked for both Come Sunday and above, and just kind of following that character and letting the story reveal itself to me, and not come out of it with a sense of panic and try and plot everything in advance, but just kind of to risk all over again. I just can never get cocky about writing, because it doesn't matter how much you've written before or what's been published. It's always a blank page that you come to, and there's no guarantee. And that's probably the reason why I'm kind of hesitant to say anything more than that.
Sure.
So what books or writers have you read in like the past 6 months or a year that inspired you or impressed you that you would mention, either fiction or nonfiction?
I've taken a break from reading fiction, and I wonder if part of it is because I've seen behind the curtain. I just know that what the whole process of editing and revising a novel, and then getting it promoted and publicized and all of that. And so I've turned to nonfiction, and what I like in a book is it doesn't matter so much the subject, but the craft of it. Those writers that can create an image where I'm left asking myself, how on earth did you do that? So Joan Didion is one of those writers for me. I recently finished her memoir, Blue Nights, and now I'm revisiting some works by Frederick Buechner. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of the greatest living theologians in America today, and he was very widely read in the late 60s and 70s on through the 80s. And I'm reading at the moment his work called The Hungering Dark, which is such a great title. And rather than that, that nutri-sweet writing that kind of dominates all the discussions about the Christian faith that's on the market right now and popular wherever you go, his writing speaks to the complexity of a faithful life and leading a life of meaning and purpose, and leaves room for people like me who are people of faith but always doubters. So and he does the same thing in his writing. He's able to conjure these images and use the craft of his language in such a way that I'm spellbound. So I'm very grateful to him and writers like him.
That's great. Well, given your success with your 2 novels, do you have any writing advice for someone who might be listening who would like to have their own stories or novels published?
Well, there's a lot of advice out there. People often talk about writing what you know, and there's great books. For me, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott is a just has all the writing advice you could ever hope to gain. So I'd steer readers to that kind of thing. But from my experience, I would add that you have to be careful who you tell your dreams to. We live in this hyper-share culture in America, and people can get addicted to, wanting to be affirmed, and so they kind of overshare in various forums. But I think that carries this risk, because people then want to respond with statistics and numbers, and I don't know, there's just a lot of dream killers out there. So I would say that, just be careful of who you tell your dreams to, and then dream big. you know. Um, what else? I'd also say that what I touched on earlier, structure should come after character. I think go with your inspiration and trust your gut and just risk it all. And then finally, I would say try to unplug as much as you can. Unplug from all the online noise and allow space for you to get bored. Nobody sits at a doctor's office anymore and stares into space. We've all got our little devices, but or on the freeway, we're listening to something all the time. But we need that space where there's quiet and for boredom to set in, because that allows these thoughts to kind of percolate for stuff that's deep down to have a chance to rise to the surface. And very often it's those things that are original thoughts or inspired thoughts.
Gotcha. That's good advice. So, given that, I did want to ask, where can people find you online if they're interested?
Don't look for me online. Go right. I'm at islamorley.com. You can read about the book at abovethebook.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all of those things. But only for a little while, because in 2 or 3 months, I plan to do my great disappearing act.
Right. And I'll have links to those in the show notes as well if people are interested. Well, again, we've been speaking with Isla Morley, author of the new novel Above. The book is in bookstores now, so grab a copy or grab an ebook. And Isla, thanks for doing this interview.
Hey, Jeff, it's been a pleasure.